Imagine stepping into the hushed, sterile sanctity of the Trapholt Art Museum in Denmark. The year's 2000, and the air is thick with the customary reverence reserved for high culture. You walk into a brightly lit room, expecting canvas or marble, but instead you are confronted with a scene of jarring domesticity. Arranged on pristine white plinths, standing like sacred relics, are 10 Moulinex OptiBlend 2000 blenders. They are sleek, modern, and utterly ordinary, the kind of appliance you might find on any kitchen counter, stained with the residue of a morning smoothie. But here, under the unforgiving gallery lights, they gleam with a sinister potential. Filled with crystal-clear water, each vessel plays host to a single, vibrant goldfish, swimming in a confused, claustrophobic circle. The bright orange of their scales cuts through the clinical whiteness of the room, a pulse of life trapped within a machine designed for obliteration. This is marcoevaristti's Helena, and at first glance it appears to be a provocative juxtaposition of the organic and the industrial. But the true horror and the true genius of the piece reveals itself only when you step closer. You notice the heavy black cords snaking down from the pedestals, plugging into the wall. You hear the faint hum of live electricity, and then you see the button. It is right there, accessible, inviting, and terrifyingly functional. The artist has not simply presented you with a static image of peril, he has handed you the weapon. The barrier between the observer and the art has been shattered, replaced by a terrifying agency. You are no longer just a gallery visitor, you are a potential executioner. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly from contemplation to palpable tension. The on button becomes a gravitational singularity, warping the space around it. It screams to be pressed, not because of a desire to kill, but because of the deeply ingrained human reflex to interact, to test boundaries, to verify reality. Is it real? Will the blades actually spin? The installation gamifies death, reducing the complex moral weight of taking a life to the simple tactile mechanics of a household switch. Evaristti understands that the monster is not the machine, nor is it the artist who placed the fish inside. The monster is the possibility residing in the fingertip of the viewer. This invitation to kill creates a suffocating silence in the gallery. Visitors circle the plinths, their eyes darting from the swimming fish to the waiting button, and then to each other. A collective anxiety takes hold. The fish, named Helena, swim innocently, unaware that their existence hangs on the whim of a stranger's curiosity or cruelty. The blender transforms into a theater of cruelty, but one where the stage is the human conscience. By placing the power of life and death in the hands of the public, Evaristti stripped away the safety of passive observation. In a traditional museum, we watch history's tragedies frozen in paint or stone, safe in the knowledge that we cannot alter the outcome. Helena denies us that comfort. It forces us to acknowledge that our inaction is a choice, just as action is. Every second the blades remain still is an active reprieve granted by the viewer. The art is not the object. The art is the unbearable friction between the impulse to destroy and the imperative to protect, played out in real time, with real consequences, in a room full of strangers, watching to see who will blink first. The provocation did not remain contained within the white walls of the Trapholt Museum for long. Art, when it slices too close to the bone of societal ethics, inevitably bleeds out into the real world. In the case of Helena, the theoretical became the actual. Within days of the exhibition opening, the unimaginable happened. Visitors, driven by curiosity, sadism, or a nihilistic desire to test the system, pressed the button. Not once, but twice. The blade spun, the water churned, and 2 goldfish were instantly liquefied, transformed from living creatures into a gruesome abstract soup. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The media descended, animal rights activists protested with righteous fury, and the Danish police arrived to unplug the blenders, seizing the installation as if it were a crime scene. which in the eyes of the law it had become. This marked the beginning of a surreal and fascinating legal battle that would put the very definition of cruelty on trial. The museum director, Peter Meyer, was charged with animal cruelty for refusing to disconnect the exhibit, choosing instead to defend the artistic integrity of the work. The courtroom became an extension of the art gallery, a theater where the absurdities of human morality were laid bare. The prosecution argued that the installation was a grotesque celebration of violence, a senseless torture of innocent beings for the sake of shock value. But the defense mounted a counter-argument that was as scientifically precise as it was philosophically uncomfortable. They called upon expert witnesses, veterinarians and biologists, who testified to the mechanics of the death itself. The Moulinex blender, they explained, operated at such high velocity that the fish were dismembered in a fraction of a second. The death was instantaneous, faster than the transmission of pain signals to the brain. In a bizarre twist, the court heard that being blended was, biologically speaking, a more humane death than the slow suffocation of a fish caught on a hook, or the cramped, disease-ridden existence of livestock in the factory farms that fed the very people protesting the exhibit. This testimony cracked open the profound hypocrisy at the heart of the controversy. The trial forced society to look in the mirror and ask, why does the death of a goldfish in the blender horrify us, while the industrialized slaughter of millions of animals for food goes unnoticed? Is it the method of death or the context? When we buy a package of ground meat, the violence is hidden, sanitized, and outsourced. We pay others to do the killing so we can enjoy the product without guilt. Helena removed that veil. It brought the slaughterhouse into the museum and placed the switch in our hands. The judge eventually acquitted Peter Meyer, ruling that the fish were killed instantly and humanely, and that no unnecessary suffering had occurred. But the legal victory was secondary to the cultural wound Evaristti had opened. The trial proved that our moral outrage is often aesthetic rather than ethical. We are not offended by killing. We are offended by killing that looks like entertainment, killing that forces us to be present for the moment of extinction. The courtroom drama revealed that we are comfortable with death only when it is invisible, wrapped in plastic, and sold to us as a commodity, but we cannot abide it when it is framed as art. When the dust settled and the blenders were finally unplugged for good, what remained was not just a controversy about dead fish, but a scathing map of the human psyche. Marcoevaristti had successfully conducted a social experiment under the guise of conceptual art. He wasn't interested in the fish. As he later stated, the fish were merely a catalyst. His true subject was the audience. He categorized the viewers into 3 distinct archetypes, creating a psychological taxonomy that remains uncomfortably relevant today: the sadist, the voyeur, and the moralist. The sadist is the one who presses the button. They are the rare few who, when given absolute power and anonymity, choose destruction. They represent the darkest impulse of humanity, the urge to exert dominance simply because one can. But Evaristti argued that the sadist is the least interesting of the 3. They are the blunt instrument, the anomaly. The real fascination lies with the other 2 groups. The voyeur is the person who stands by the pedestal, hand hovering near the switch, or watching someone else's hand. They want to see the blades spin. They want the thrill of the transgressive act, but they lack the courage to commit it themselves. They are the bystanders of history, the ones who watch tragedies unfold on the evening news with a mixture of horror and entertainment, safe in their passivity. They are complicit through their gaze, feeding the spectacle without dirtying their hands. Then there is the moralist, the one who storms out, who calls the police, who screams at the museum staff. Evaristti posited that this reaction, too, is a part of the performance. The moralist uses the artwork to construct their own identity of righteousness. Their outrage is a way of distancing themselves from the potential for violence that exists within us all. By condemning the art, they reassure themselves of their own goodness. Yet, as the courtroom drama proved, this morality is often fragile and selective. the moralist creates a hierarchy of empathy where a goldfish in a gallery is worth saving, but the unseen suffering that sustains their lifestyle is ignored. Helena ultimately serves as a terrifying moral mirror. It reflects a society that has become desensitized to systemic violence, but is easily triggered by symbolic violence. The legacy of the work is not the dead fish, but the uncomfortable silence it leaves in its wake. It asks us to confront the civilized brutality we accept in our daily structures, our food systems, our foreign policies, our environmental destruction, versus the hypocrisy we display when that brutality is isolated and framed. The goldfish in the blender is a proxy for every vulnerable thing we hold power over. Evaristti forces us to realize that the on button is not just in the museum. It is on our dinner tables, in our voting booths, and in our wallets. We press it every day, usually without thinking. Helena simply asked us to stop, look at the creature swimming in the water, and acknowledge that the finger on the switch is ours. In the end, the art didn't kill the fish, it just removed the alibi.